Hi again, I'm Baba G, and this is the second video, and it's going to be a series apparently. First video I told you a little bit about how she was arrested and how the cops left out Pete's confession. And I told you about how she got a public defender that shows up only at the arraignment and she never sees him again. And so things just aren't done. They didn't check to see if there was any tape of the confession. And she could have got she could have gotten an investigator, but nobody seems to want to tell her that she could have had one. They could have looked into these things. If you don't know the law, you're had. But even if you know the law, you're had. So what happens with Jojo? She gets another public defender. She ends up with 3. Now the law says that a public defender is really supposed to she's only supposed to have 1, okay, and it's supposed to go from the start of the arraignment all the way through, even appeal if necessary, because that person knows the case. To let them in and out, it would just be a nightmare, which it is. But anyway, so this second one shows up named Shadi, and she really doesn't do much, but hey, it's already been a month and a half or so. They've lost the opportunity to get some crucial evidence, I'm sure. But so they say okay, now we're going to set a trial, and they see the law says also there's rules of law, and I don't want to go too deep into it because it's boring, but it's really not when you're in the middle of it. Some of the laws are there to punish you for when you do something wrong. But there's also laws there to protect you from somebody going after you. And they're pretty good about using the laws to go after people, but they're not very good about using the laws to protect you. And so what ends up happening with this attorney, she shows up, and she doesn't do much really. Jojo only gets to meet with her 1 time. And now, just to give you a perspective, she shows up in the middle of March. No, actually, it's the end of February for her first time, and then they do it again in the middle of March, and they set a hearing date, and it's a preliminary hearing of April 26th, and it's just before they usually do it a week before the trial, so they set a trial on May 3rd, and that was the trial date, and that's when Jojo should have had everything together, and okay, and you got to understand they have to try her. Because she was let out, she was let out on her own recognizance, and so they have to do it within 180 days, and of her arraignment date. So that was January 12th. Not to get too technical, but technically they had until July in order to try her. That is, unless she needs continuances. Now, as long as they charge the defense with the continuances, then they can just keep going indefinitely with prolonging the trial. But so Shadi shows up, and then they're getting ready for the trial and preliminary hearing that they have out on April 26th, and they're not ready. Nobody's ready, I guess. That's what's been said anyway. The defense isn't ready, and neither is the prosecution. They haven't disclosed their evidence. In fact, they had the lab evidence, which is crucial, you would think, in this case, because if that's what they found in her purse, if it was methamphetamine, it could have been baby powder for all Joe knows. And Jojo, I refer to her as Joe. And so they decided that they're going to continue it. Now, here's the problem that they have. They've got to do it within 180 days. The first offender, public pretender, boom, boom, gone. And you think about it, they're getting kind of nervous because it's getting kind of close to that July date, So what does the judge do? Well, he continues it, but he charges the defense for the continuance. Not only does he charge them for the continuance, but he continues it 74 days out. That's a long time to continue a trial. And the reason he gave to the defense was awaiting lab test results. Well, yeah, they were, but so was the prosecution. And That's important because the prosecution, that's their case against JoJo. Not only that, but also things along the line of like if her fingerprints weren't on, if it was in a baggie or whatever it was in, if there's no fingerprints on hers, then how did they get in her purse? Or if there are fingerprints from somebody else, how do they get in there? Things along those lines. So anyway, so the prosecution, they don't have the evidence yet, so they're waiting to get the evidence, I guess, out of the lab. And so the judge continues it. But the problem is he charges it to the defense, because if he charged it to the prosecution that long, the law says that the judge must then dismiss the prosecution. Now, he can do it with prejudice and bring it back, without prejudice, rather, and bring it back and retry her, but he's going to have to dismiss it, and he doesn't want to do that. So what he does is he charges the defense 74 days. That's a long time, and that's a bit much. Anyway, so they go on, and still there's not a whole lot being done by the shoddy lady. And, they've got interviews that they got to do with the policeman. The one lady cop, they didn't ever get to interview, I don't think. Maybe they did, but she was the one that looked in JoJo's purse, but she was out on pregnancy leave. They never went to even look at the house, or the neighbors or anything along those lines. And then they have another preliminary hearing scheduled for July 9th. And so Shoddy shows up July 9th. The trial then is scheduled for the 16th, 7 days away. And guess what? Prosecution still hasn't got their evidence. Where is it? Well, let's see. She was arraigned in January. Now we're in the middle of July. That's 6 months, and they still haven't got their evidence back from the lab. Something's pretty shaky there, I would say. But guess what? Shoddy decides that she wants to petition, or she files a motion to quit as far as being JoJo's lawyer 1 week before her trial. 1 week. And if you think about it logically, if she hadn't quit, the prosecution has no case. They have no evidence. They're supposed to have it at least a week before, but they don't have it. So it's a little shaky to me.